Marissa S. Costonis of ChangeBITES. Welcome to Nature of Reality Radio. You were at the Empowered Light Holistic Expo. I didn't watch your presentation, but I contacted you and all the other guests there to be guests on my show. Very interested to hear what you have to say about eating habits and whatnot. Before I give you the chance, a little disclaimer. Folks, I know that for the past 2.5 years, you guys have been getting really, really pissed off about the fact that listening to my show on YouTube with headphones has caused one sound to be in one ear, my voice, and then the other ear, my guest's voice. After all this time, I finally found out that the reason that happened was because my MP3 Skype recorder was in stereo mode. I've switched it to mono mode. I don't know why nobody ever told me about this. I don't know how it never occurred to anyone to tell me this. I assumed it was artificial intelligence sabotage all along, but it wasn't. So that was my bad. Folks, just deal with it for the last 2.5 years of shows that I've done. From now on, it shouldn't be an issue because I have it on mono. It may cause not as good sound quality between my guest and me here on the audio, but that's a sacrifice I think is willing to worth make, just to make sure that you don't have to deal with one ear and the other ear when you're listening to my disclaimers. And I'll just point this out in the next 5 shows, so all the listeners who don't listen to this interview will probably get that through their heads for the next 5. So now that I've gotten that out of the way, it's great to be back from California. Went to the Contact in the Desert conference for the first time, but now I've got UFOs and alien stuff off my mind. It's time to worry about eating habits and such, and that's why I have you on the show here. I guess I might as well give you the chance to tell your life story from a primary source perspective, to explain what you experienced, who you are, what you do, and why you do it. What did you learn that caused you to focus on the things you do that ChangeBITES is all about? And then after you introduce yourself, please give a nice concise description of regurgitate everything that you would have said in that presentation at Empowered Light Holistic Expo. You got the floor. I promise not to interrupt you.
Well, thanks so much for having me. And actually, I would encourage you to interrupt me because in my presentations and my workshops, it's a very interactive discussion. And so any questions or anything that comes up for you personally or just general questions you have, please feel free to shoot them out at me.
Well, the thing is, I have been accused of filibustering my guests, and not only that, I talk really, really fast when I do, and it kind of drives people a little crazy sometimes when I do that. So as a sacrifice, I choose not to interrupt. I don't have Alex Jones-itis like some people who interrupt do. But if you want me to do, then I guess so. But I'm more interested to hear what you have to say and jot anything down on my little notepad that I have here if I hear something interesting.
Yeah.
And again, I have your site up as a guide too. So I
Absolutely.
intend not to interrupt you, but we'll see how it goes. You got the floor.
I hope you do interrupt because it does make for an interesting conversation because every conversation is also a little different depending on the group and what the challenges are that they're facing. But I want to say thank you so much for having me on your program today. Food and health is, so it's such a topic that is so much, it's discussed over and over again. And yet what I find is that what's missing is sort of a methodology or a step-by-step process to kind of get through it. And what I'm here to talk about today is a little bit about my journey and my methodology for change, because a lot of people just decide to make a food change, something even big, and they want to do it overnight. And that's why 90% of all diets fail. Because we can't just make a change without a real structured process around it. Businesses make change all the time. A business would never decide to put a new technology in or do a merger without some planning and some prep work and a real structured process along the way. So I'm here to talk about not necessarily the what to eat, but really the process around how to change. So that's a bit of my intro. Ironically, my background is not, my original career start was not in nutrition. My journey started in corporate management consulting, which is kind of an interesting ploy. You think, how did she get from corporate management consulting to nutrition? And it's a bit of an interesting thing in terms of people say that they marry their skills with their passion, and that's what I've been able to do here. So let me back up and just say, I spent well over 10 years in corporate consulting, and I've worked with clients all over the world. I've worked in Germany and Belgium and London, and helping corporations with major strategic initiatives that they were about to do. So perhaps a brand new operating vision or a new strategy or a technology or a process or a complete reorg. And my job was to coach the executives in the organization around how to actually design that, but most importantly, how to implement it and have it be embraced by the employees in the organization. Because change sounds great. It sounds great and it sounds easy, but the reality is that the implementation and the planning is critical. And so my job was to work with companies and work with executives to help guide and coach them to have the employees embrace the change so that all the benefits could be realized. And certainly was challenging work, and consultants love a methodology. So we have employed lots of best practices in industry around corporate change, and a lot of the original methodologies for helping organizations change actually started with a woman named Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross developed the change curve from the death and dying process, ironically. And she helped people through that process of change. So organizations took that methodology, and it's been morphed into lots of different processes and procedures and sort of the journey for change. And corporations took that on as their own. So I spent, again, over 10 years helping companies all over the world really embrace change in technology and process and organization and strategy and people and training. And after years and years of that work, as many of us know, and several people, many people today are getting kind of burnt out, I found myself in an interesting situation where I had pushed aside a couple of health challenges along the way. That started maybe with some digestive issues and some migraines, and then some back problems and some joint pain and some sinus issues. And all of a sudden, these things started piling up. We all work too hard, and we aren't taking care of ourselves the right way. I wasn't. And after years and years of doing this, and then I started a family, I noticed that these health challenges, while small in and of themselves, were starting to pile up. And it wasn't until one day I was cooking for a big family picnic, and I stood in the kitchen, and I felt this wave of tingling go up and down my leg. And it happened once and twice. And over the course of the next few weeks, this tingling and this wave of numbness went up and down my one leg. It spread to the other leg. It went into my arms. It went throughout my body and up into my face. And I thought, oh boy, I really have to change. Something's got to give. Like, I had hit what I call my tipping point. And I knew that I better figure out what was going on. And while I really went to a bunch of different doctors and I was really hoping for some magic pill, I finally did get some answers, but it wasn't exactly the answer I wanted. They told me that I needed to completely, fundamentally change my diet. Now, a little bit about me, Andrew. I'm 100% Italian, and which really means that we are talking about the next meal while we're eating the first one. We can't get through one meal without planning the next couple. So, needless to say, food was really the center of my life. And I was told I had to give up gluten and dairy. In fact, for a period of time, I had to give up all grains. I had to reduce or almost eliminate all processed foods and sugars into my diet. And for goodness sake, they said, you have got to start meditating and calm down. And I thought, oh boy, couldn't I just get a prescription or a pill or some powder that could make this all go away? But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. So as complex as it was to find somebody that had some answers, it was even more complex. And what I find when I talk to my clients and people all around the country is that Many doctors are leaning to more of a food as medicine approach. Some doctors, even especially some top allergy doctors, are using food as medicine as a last resort after a whole bunch of medications. But regardless, what I find is that many people are told they have to fundamentally change their diet, and then they're told goodbye and good luck, because most doctors are not trained in nutrition, and certainly not in the process of how to transition your diet. So they kind of said good luck and we hope it works out. So I went home and I was completely overwhelmed, and I thought, how the heck am I supposed to do this? So after feeling sorry for myself, I stopped and I thought for a minute. I said, Marissa, I said to myself, you've been helping organizations around the world with massive transformational change. Surely something that you have learned along the way in corporate America could apply to your own food and health transformation. So I ended up going back. I literally pulled out all my old leadership and change books and all of my old methodologies. And, again, consultants love a good methodology. And I had processes and these structures and organization charts. And I sat down with it all around me and I poured through it and I tried to apply it to a food and health transformation. And I was really blown away. It all applied. So I decided at that moment that I was going to create my own methodology for not telling people what to eat, but help them along the journey with specific tools and processes for how to change. And that's kind of what started. That's what started back in 2012. And I did create that methodology. I went back to nutrition school and I became a certified health coach. And I have been working with clients ever since. So before I continue, do you want to jump in at all? Do you have anything you've written down you want to jump in on?
No, not in particular. I think that will change when you discuss the stuff in your that you talked about in your presentation, I'm sure. Or maybe the stuff that I would write down is already on your site here, but we'll see if that's the case. So please regurgitate your presentation.
Okay. So the first thing I really tell people is I start to talk about change, and the best way I can think of is to ask folks if they remember the commercial where a couple of guys are sitting at a pool party and they're having some beers and they're sitting around and they say to each other, I am never getting married. And the other guy says, oh my God, no way, dude, we're never getting married. Fast forward in the commercial, the wedding bells are ringing, he's proposed, he's getting married. He turns to his wife and he says, we are never having kids. All while they're sitting on an airplane and some kid is like kicking the back of their seat. And she looks at him and she says, no way, we're never having kids. And the commercial goes on. They're sitting in their awesome loft in the city and they have this one child and they look at each other and they say, we are never moving to the suburbs. And what happens? Of course, there he is pushing his lawnmower, telling her we're never going to have another child as he cleans off all of the crayons on the wall. She says, I'm pregnant, and so on and so forth. And at the end of the commercial, he's sitting with his wife and his two beautiful children in front of the fire, and they're all asleep. And he has his arms around them and he says, I am never letting go. Now, what does all this have to do with diet and change? And what I'll tell you is that if you had told that guy 5 years before that in 5 years he would be married, he would have not one child but two, he'd be driving a minivan, and he'd be pushing a lawnmower in the suburbs, he would have, not only would he would have said no way, he would have gone running out the back door. Because too much change is overwhelming for people. And that's why 90% of diets fail, but yet 95% of all corporate initiatives are a success. And why is that? Because change needs to happen kind of one step at a time and one bite at a time, as I say. So this guy needed to take those small changes because when we identify a new change in our life and something happens, we disrupt the normal. Then we get used to that, we get comfortable, we get settled into our habits, and then we move on to the next change. And that's just life. There's a reason we don't give birth to teenagers, right? We would never be able to handle it, right? You have to go through, or there's a reason why we don't we're not pregnant for a month, right? We need time to adjust to the change sort of one step at a time. And that's the foundation of my methodology, is around one step or one bite at a time. And that's why I never actually say to people, I'm not going to take away all the foods that you love today. I'm not going to tell you never to have sugar again and to give up 100% of everything you like. We've got to figure out, where are you today and how do we slowly get to your end game and your end goal? So that's kind of my methodology. So again, when I was faced with having to make a major change, what I found when I went online and I bought a bunch of books around eating healthy and eating gluten-free and dairy-free and no processed foods and low sugar, I found a lot of people are out there telling people what to eat, but nobody's giving us this structured process for how to change. So that's kind of what my process is. And again, it's using this idea of one bite at a time. So I'd like to kind of cover just 4 main themes from my book. And the book outlines what I call the 5 bites to health. And it is this methodology that takes you through the different stages of change. But I want to pull out sort of 4 themes from the book. And the first one is to envision health, to create a health vision. Now, what does that mean? Businesses would never just implement a new system or merge with another company or do a reorganization if they didn't have some sort of vision for why. Why do we need to do this? Are we losing market share, right? Are our systems outdated? Do we need to, are our margins too low and we're losing money? We've got to increase revenue. Like, what is the reason to disrupt our normal state? And ironically, this is the first thing that in a food and health transformation, people always gloss over. I see people, they find out I'm a health coach. The very first thing they say is, well, what should I give up? I had one woman, I was in Staples getting some things copied for a workshop, and she said, I see you're a health coach. I really love eggplant. Should I give that up? I heard it's really bad for you. I said, eggplant, meanwhile, they have bags of McDonald's behind them. And I'm like, eggplant isn't our problem. People immediately go to what I can and can't eat. And what I'm here to say is that the first most important theme and the first step in any food and health change is really coming up with a vision. So why do you want to make a change, right? What are the benefits that you hope to get out of it? And when I bring this up with clients, what's really fascinating is I ask them to really think about their life with perfect health. I say, imagine and I did this with clients all the time. I said, imagine it's 5 years from now. Your company has everything it wanted. It's exactly where you want it to be. What does that look like? And I use this visioning process with my clients. And I've actually had so many clients just stop and think about their life with perfect health. And perfect health for me is different than perfect health for you. I mean, perfect health for one person is simply going to the bathroom every day. Perfect health for someone else is being able to just take a walk without pain. It might be a really good night's sleep. It also might be uh, the sinuses and allergies not taking over your life. So every single person that I work with has a different vision of what perfect health looks like for them. And it's just a very personal, it's a personal vision because it's your own personal vision of how your life looks and feels. And here's the best part. What are you doing in this life with perfect health? So for me, for example, I had serious constipation. I had major bloating issues. I had sinus infections that would attack me. I would be in bed for 2 weeks at a time, sometimes back to back. I had migraines. I couldn't sleep. And I had this crazy tingling in my leg. So that's completely different from me versus you. So I had a list of what my short-term health vision looked like and what my long-term health vision. And a long-term vision for me, for example, was I had a really low white blood count. So my body was constantly fighting infection. So while in the short term, I wanted my nervous system to calm down and I wanted to have my digestive system work, my long term was that I wanted my blood work to be normal. And this is different. I mean, I have clients with celiac, I have clients with diabetes, I have clients with gout, I've got clients with all kinds of issues. And so their vision is different. So there's short and there's long term. But unless we really stop and we think about what our own perfect health looks like, it's really hard to move on because we're just randomly drawing, we're just drawing straws and it's just at random. So keeping this vision keeps you motivated to make the changes throughout the process. So that is I would say that's the most important thing. And in my book, I actually have a whole slew of questions that will help you walk through this envisioning process. And I've got a bunch of questions, but I also have this really cool shield that you can create, and it's sort of a banner, and it's something that you can post. So you can keep it at your desk or take a picture of it and keep it on your phone. And every single day when you're having a rough time, periodically here and there, you can look at that vision and say, that's what I want, and I'm not going to stop until I get there. One day there was a day where I was early in my journey, in my transition, and I had another sinus infection, and I was really struggling, and I was just crying. I just said, I'm so sick of being sick. And it was at that point that this idea of visioning really also came to me. And again, not only did I do it in work, but I sat there and I said, what if all your doctor's appointments were gone? What if you didn't have to worry about sinus infections? And I started to think about people I knew that never went to the doctor. They were never sick. They could make plans and be gone all day and not worry about being tired. And I started to think about those people. And I said, what if that was you? What if that was your life and you could go stand up paddling in the ocean and wander around a farmer's market all afternoon and go to the beach, take a long hike? What if that was you? And I was crying and I thought, wow, I didn't even dream, I've never dreamed about what that would be like. But it was at that minute that I said, I'm going to get there. I'm going to get there. I know exactly what it looks like, what it feels like, almost what it tastes like. I'm going to get there, and then I'm going to write a book about my journey to get there so I can help everybody else. And I'm going to use my business experience as a background. So that's the visioning. And if you look at my vision, my picture, it's got all the things that I do today. And so it's really cool to pull that out and say, yep, am I speaking at conferences? Yes. Am I helping clients? Did I write a book? I mean, all that was on there. So it's really powerful. And what's really interesting, Andrew, is people are very afraid to go there. But I think that unless I had gone there and all my clients, I make them do the vision for really asking, why do I need to make this change? And why do I need to do it now? You know, some people, they're willing to make all kinds of changes for their children. But if I say, why do you need to do it? And here's kind of a crazy thought too, is what happens if I don't make this change? So a lot of people with autoimmune diseases, if you have one autoimmune, you're a lot more likely to get another one. That's why people with celiac end up with Hashimoto or arthritis. One sort of lends its way to another. And so I ask people to think about, well, what happens if you don't change your diet and your health now? Who's counting on you? What happens if you do nothing and you keep eating the same way and you keep living the same way? And that's a bit of a scary thought, but it does help. It does help because the idea is that the vision is what creates that motivation for you to succeed in the future. So that's kind of the first theme. The second thing to really think about is this idea, what I say is go slow to go fast. And we use this in business all the time, right? In business, let's take the Whole Foods merger, for example. Whole Foods merged with Amazon bought Whole Foods. And when they did that, if they signed the papers on Friday, they don't necessarily have all their stores and their businesses merged right on Monday. Of course not. What was the first thing they did? First, they announced it, right? Then the second thing they did is they dropped a couple prices on some things. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. That's actually called a quick hit. And that's to show people like, yep, we're really doing this and we're going to show you right now. That's a quick hit. But the idea of go to slow to go fast is, every business creates an implementation plan when they're facing a big change. And they take each step and they come up with a plan that builds on the changes. So Amazon didn't have their delivery right away, right, when they bought Whole Foods, but they started to make changes slowly. Because the reality is if you make too drastic of a change, it's not going to last. I get people all the time that watch documentaries. So, and I watched all of them. I think they're fantastic. You watch documentaries like What the Health. And immediately people come to me, I get the call and they say, Marissa, I watched What the Health this weekend. It's awesome. I want to go vegan. I'm going to go vegan on Monday. And I laugh and as I say, why does everybody want to make a change on Monday? Nobody ever says, I'm going to start a diet on Wednesday. But, they say, I want to go vegan. So what I do is I say, okay, well, hold on a minute. Before you go vegan on Monday, if you go too big, too fast, inevitably you're going to give up. And that's what happens. So what I like to do is, just like businesses, start with what they're good at today. There's a reason why Amazon bought Whole Foods and they didn't buy, a dry cleaner business, right? Because Amazon is good at order fulfillment and Whole Foods needed a good fulfillment and delivery mechanism. That's why that makes such a good, they make such a good pair. So I'm going to say if all you eat today is meat, is 90% of your diet, but you want to jump to a vegan diet. I'm not saying that's not a good thing, but what I'm saying is that if you go too different from the way you eat today, at least start with where you are today. So what I do is I have something called personal best foods. And personal best foods are the fruits and vegetables that you love to eat today. So I go through an inventory and I use this with kids that are in grade school all the way up to top executives. And you look at I have an inventory in the book and you rank all the different fruits and vegetables and beans and nuts and legumes, all the whole foods that you like today. And then what we do is we bridge a gap and we create a slow transition plan for how to get more of those fruits and vegetables and whole foods into your diet in breakfast, in lunch, and in dinner. And then we start to bridge, and I have a ranking. It's, foods I love to eat and foods that are okay or I'll try to eat. So we create this transition plan that starts to implement and identify more and different foods into your diet that are whole foods. Because the other thing I find is that everybody's talking about what food you need to give up. Stop eating sugar, stop eating gluten, stop eating processed, stop eating dyes, food dyes, right? And all those are good things. But nobody ever really stops and says, wait a minute, let's focus on what do we actually like today that we can eat? And I've used this process with people that have severe allergies. They come to me with 12 or 15 things that they're allergic to. And I say, all right, well, let's back up and put those foods aside. And let's focus on the foods that you can have. And then we build a menu from there. So start with the foods you like today and create that transition plan. The other thing that I really like to talk about with people is to really get a sense of how much change can you stomach? And what I mean by that is sometimes people come to me and they'll say, I was diagnosed with arthritis. I really need to change my diet to reduce inflammation. I want to do this. I want to do this. I want to do this. Meanwhile, they're in the process of a move. They're changing jobs. Their dad is sick, and their child is having trouble at school. I say, okay, I'm pretty sure that if you go hog wild on a diet that is extremely strict and we take everything that you love out of your diet, that's just going to put you over the edge. So think about how much change can I actually stomach right now, and how important is it that I make this change? If you've got breast cancer and you want to get sugar and dairy out of your diet, 100% you're going to do that. But if you've got a little bit more room here, it's just important because everybody's stomach for change is a little different depending on certain times in their life. And what I say is it doesn't mean not to make the change. It just means to be smart about how you slowly implement certain things. So for example, if you want to go to a plant-based diet and you've just found out you have cancer and you say, I want to do this tomorrow, then what I might say is, okay, well, why don't we start with a food delivery service so that you can have that, delivered to your house. The instructions are right there. It will make that change just a little bit easier to start out with. So that's kind of a sense of your stomach for change. And then we talked about quick hits, which again, when you come out with this big thing, I'm going to give up all sugar in my diet. Okay, hold on a minute. What are some quick hits that you can do today to start to decrease it? So instead of, maybe you take soda out of your diet, and that's the first step, right? Maybe you switch to more pure forms of sugar. So instead of regular sugar, you try to use some honey, or you try some of those natural, or you put maple syrup in your plain oatmeal. You start to make some of those smaller changes, and I promise you that in that process, you actually you won't believe how this go slow to go fast process works. Any notes? How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. And well, one thing you did say that kind of really caught me off guard. You said Amazon and Whole Foods make a good pair. I'm sure a lot of people are gonna like drop their jaws and open their eye sockets after they hear you say that, because I was very, very angry that Amazon bought Whole Foods, because Whole Foods is where I get all my foods, and Amazon is owned by Jeff Bezos, who for all intents and purposes, the only thing he's good for is being the ultimate monopoly monster who wishes to rule the world. So I don't know how in the world you can assert that Amazon and Whole Foods make a good pair when all that's done is basically lower the quality of Whole Foods food at the price of keeping Jeff Bezos the world's richest entrepreneur. So I'm
Right.
sorry, but where are you making that assertion?
Yeah. So I'm not saying it from a personal standpoint. What I'm saying is that if you are Amazon and your goal is to increase revenue and that's your vision, then you don't go and buy a dry cleaning business. You start with what you're good at, and then you buy a similar organization that will allow you to achieve your operation, your vision. I'm not saying whether or not I agree with it from a personal standpoint. I'm saying that with what his vision was. So for example, I don't know if you've seen in New Jersey, but I've driven by a couple of dry cleaning businesses and they have the word Tide on top of them. And I thought that's another example, right? Tide wants to increase its market share, it wants to increase its revenue. And it thought, Tide didn't go out and buy a bunch of grocery stores. They started going out and buying a bunch of dry cleaners, because you have to start with what you're good at and look for these synergies in the market. It's not for me 100%. I'm not at all sort of going along or approving with the, again, the personal or environmental aspect of this. It's purely from a business objective, if that is your business objective. Does that make sense?
Fair and reasonable enough. And in regards to how people change as a result of changing their diets, I happen to have a very kind of unpleasant experience that suggests that going vegan really isn't all as good natured and cracked up as it appears to be. I mean, there was this one day a couple years ago where I wanted to meet up with someone who I hadn't spoken with in over a year, and I had met up with him. He had when I saw him come up to the nature reserve, where I was going to hang out with him for a little bit. He showed up very distinctively, like making a statement, wearing a shirt that had the word vegan in very huge green letters, like he wanted to rub it in the world's face that he was a vegan. And it seemed, when I had a conversation with him, it seemed like he really wanted to disagree with everything I said and get all buddy buddy and all, and wanted to make a little bit of a conflict out of everything. And I'm thinking, what happened to this guy? He wasn't this kind of a jerk when he wasn't entirely vegan in the not too distant past. And I interestingly remember my horoscope from that day, and I remember seeing, I wonder what my horoscope says, because I hadn't seen it at all yet up until that point. So after I stopped chilling with him, I looked at my horoscope, and the first thing it said was, a pink elephant in the room will be brought to your attention, and you will feel the urge to do something about it. And interestingly, after I saw that, I thought, okay, something tells me I can't be friends with this guy anymore, because it's not gonna work out. So I mean, he was after I first met him a few times, there were a few times where he was texting me over my phone, telling me some really unpleasant things about how I deserve to be shunned for eating animals, and as does anybody else who eats animals.
Well,
Well,
that's exactly why I think there's enough people out there that have strong convictions about what to eat, and that's not what I do. My focus is whatever your goal is. I help you with a structured process to get there. And it doesn't have to be something as big as, even going vegan if that's what you choose. It could be something like, I have clients that say, I just want to add a few more greens into my diet, right? I want to eat a little bit less sugar. I want to eat a little bit less processed foods and replace it with more whole foods. So the change can be as small or as big as you like, but sort of the what to eat, I kind of leave out there. There's enough discussion and arguments about that. So people certainly feel really strongly about it. And in a little bit, I'm going to talk a little about kind of what to do when you choose one way of eating or one health plan, or whatever your strategy is, and kind of do some trial and error, and how to figure out if it's working for you. Maybe you tried something and it is or it isn't working. So that's sort of part of the methodology, because I don't think that we should ever get stuck in one way without continuing to improve ourselves, understand what our body is telling us, right? I'm eating a certain way. Is this working? I mean, I had to take grains out of my diet for a period of time to reduce the inflammation, to see if that would affect my nervous system. And it did have a big effect on me, and it helped me get better, achieve my vision. But what I found is that over the course of about 3 months, I was getting really thin, and that was not working for me. So I needed to add back in a couple of whole grains, still gluten free, but I needed to add back in some whole grains. Now, there are people that eat completely grain free, and that works for their body. So what I'm here to say is, and this, I talk a lot about this in the book, is how do we learn what the messages are from our bodies and listen to what our body tells us? Because I think that messages from our body are a lot like a baby's cry, right? Only a mother or a father or a caregiver understands, oh, that's a hungry cry. Oh, no, that's a wet diaper cry. Oh, that's a overtired cry. And I teach children this, and I teach grown men and women this, is when you feel something a little different, and we often start with a food diary, to really understand, what am I eating? How am I eating? And then how do I feel against my vision? And how do I feel against my goals? And am I having any reactions? So we go through a whole process around that, because while something on paper might sound good, it might not work for you over a long period of time, and we might need to adjust it. So that's kind of what my focus is. And And I think it works because it allows everybody their own individual, it respects everyone's own individual ideas and plans and their own vision for what's going to work for their body. So that's kind of how I would address that. One of the other things that I noticed pretty quickly going through my own food and health transformation and relating it back to a business plan is I created these change plans all the time for businesses. And the change plan had a couple different components. And what I found is that nobody was creating a change plan for making a food and health change. So things like technology. So businesses often, if they have a new strategy, they might say, all right, well, how does technology help me get there? So think about technology if you want to make a change. So let's say you have diabetes and you want to start tracking how much sugar you're eating. Well, there's certain different food apps that you can track. There's a ton of apps for tracking your food. There's apps for scanning food at the grocery store to see what the nutrition ingredients are. There's also, you can use technology. Maybe you want to start taking advantage of some delivery, some food delivery, perhaps a grocery delivery. Maybe your local grocery store delivers if you spend a certain amount. Perhaps you want to do one of those meal kit deliveries according to whatever food style that you want to eat at. There's so many different ways to use technology and to really stop and think about, how do I want to eat? What do I want to accomplish? How do I want to eat? How do I use technology to help me get there? You could even think of technology even as, what are the tools that I need? Again, businesses do it all the time. What tools do we need to make this change? And I would say, if you're going to be cooking more, take a look around your kitchen. Do you have all the tools that you need? Do you have a couple of good pots, 2 good pots? Do you have 2 good pans? Do you have a great colander? You've got a couple of spatulas and, a really good mixing bowl, and some other spoons and, mixing spoons and that sort of thing. So thinking about the tools that you need, businesses do that all the time, but we never quite really go there. We just assume that all that'll come. One of the things I often tell people is the desire to change alone is not enough. Businesses that want to do better in the market, they want to increase their market share, the desire alone is not enough. They need a plan, and so do we. So technology is the first thing. Another thing that you might need to look at is the process. So businesses all the time look at, how do I streamline this process to make it faster, to make it more efficient? We have to look at that too. What's our process for cooking? What's our process for eating? Right? How do we make that better? And in the book, I have something called a recipe technique. And so instead of, having 100 million different recipes that we try to keep track of, and I don't know about you, I've got a Pinterest board, and most people I talk to have a Pinterest board with, thousands of recipes, and they never make any of them. Or we end up with cookbooks, and we make 1 or 2 things out of each one. So my idea is that each person come up with 10 recipe techniques. So the technique is the general way of cooking, so that it allows you to incorporate a variety of your own personal best foods. So for example, stir fry is one of my top 10 techniques. So once every 10 days or 2 weeks, I will make a stir fry. And that might include a variety of grains that I love or that I have on hand, whatever fresh vegetables I have on hand, whatever I might have in my pantry. I always keep some water chestnuts or some baby corn. And then whatever fresh vegetables I have in the drawer, I'm able to whip that up in a minute. Another thing might be, if you eat eggs, you could do a frittata. So every couple weeks, what can I make in a frittata? And I have a great pan, and I make a frittata. So there's a whole bunch of different categories or techniques of cooking. And that's why, if you go on my Instagram, I never make the same thing twice. I might make 100 different meals and they never look the same because I never have exactly the same ingredients on hand. I can buy what's fresh, what's on sale, what's local. but yet my techniques stay the same. Perhaps a batch of roasted vegetables every week. That looks different, but the same process. So thinking about the process of cooking, again, how do you streamline it? Maybe you chop all your food on Sundays and you do some food prep. Maybe it's worth the extra money to go buy the food that's already chopped and prepped at the store. We're seeing a lot more of that in the grocery stores these days. So think about the process for how you prepare and eat your food and how can you streamline that. The next area that businesses always look at when they're making a big change is, what skills do I need? So, for example, when there's a big change in a company, there is inevitably a lot of employee training, right? There's lots of training. And yet, when we want to make a change, nobody ever really stops and says, hold on a minute, what kind of skills do I need to eat this way? So if you're eating, let's say you're going on a keto diet, right? And you want to incorporate more meat products into your diet, right? What skills do I need? How do you grill? How do I roast? How do I braise? Right? What skills do I need? And perhaps maybe I want to take an online cooking class. Maybe I want to watch a couple of YouTube videos, but I have to look at my skills and not just assume, oh, I'm going keto. Oh, I could just do that on Monday without even thinking twice. No, you have to look at your process, you have to look at your technology, and you really have to understand your skills and improve them and try to get some new ones. And the last aspect of this that businesses do really well that we can learn from is to really think about how to find support. I call it finding your tribe, right? Which is partnering with other people who either know what they're doing or they've been through it before. Now, businesses do this by hiring consultants, luckily for me, because that was my job. But why don't we do it? I was listening on the radio today and they said 30% of people that are on a diet don't tell anyone. They're afraid to tell other people. They're afraid they're going to fail, and they're afraid that somebody's going to hold them accountable and look down on them if they don't eat perfectly. And B, they're embarrassed that they need to be on a diet at all. So this idea of finding your tribe, I work with a lot of celiac patients, and they really need a good tribe. Years ago, I used to work with them and they would say, Marissa, what has gluten? What doesn't have gluten? What are the hidden forms of gluten? You can find all that now with a Google search. You don't need me. I mean, there are a few things that I can give you some tips on, but what we really do a lot, I do a lot of coaching around how do you tell let's say you're in college. What do you do when everybody's ordering a pizza late night and you're the only one? What do you do when you're on a business trip? What do you do when you go to Thanksgiving at a family or friend's house and there's nothing you can eat, right? How do we properly prepare and talk to the people around us and help them help us? And how do we get them to truly understand, especially with something like celiac, and so many of these other health issues are so much more than just going on a fad diet. They truly make a great impact on our health. So how do you really find your tribe? Talk to the people in your family. Sit down with your spouse, your kids, a friend that you see a lot, and really think about who can help you. And you'll be surprised. You'll be surprised at two things. First, you'll be surprised at how many people really do want to help you when they understand why you're doing it. And when you say to them, I need your help. This is what I need you to do to help me. Very few people are going to say, nah, sorry, if they're in your tribe. The second thing is I tell people to really look for other people outside their tribe that can help them. It could be, I've had people tell me all the time, it was a parent at my child's school, it was a neighbor, it was a friend of a friend, it was a coworker, and we had the same health issue and we were eating the same way. And next thing we know, we formed a great friendship and we ended up really helping each other. And that happened with me. I have completely random people in my life that have helped me through my own transformation. And you just have to be open to it and really understand. And I think what's nice about finding your tribe also is it's so nice when people go out of their way to help you. I was at Thanksgiving dinner. I was visiting my young niece who had just bought a house, and it was the first time she was ever cooking Thanksgiving. And we sat down at the table, and my son and I are both gluten-free. Again, not because it's a fad diet, but it has real emotional and physical implications on us. And we sat down, and she said, Aunt Missy, I made you and your son a gluten-free stuffing, and I have some gluten-free rolls here, and I made sure the gravy was gluten-free. And it just warmed my heart. When people love to do it, they really do. When they understand how important it is, the people in your tribe can be extremely, extremely important. So that's just sort of a glimpse into a change plan that works for businesses, and it really can work for us too. But for some reason, when it comes to eating, people just think that all of a sudden, tomorrow, I'm going to start a diet and I'm not going to look at technology. I'm not going to look at the vision for why. I'm not going to look at the process or the skills I need or who do I partner with to make it all happen. We just think, oh, we can do it. Why not? Just through willpower alone. And we just know through the statistics that just simply isn't true. I will also say that Facebook has become a huge help for people on a variety of different eating styles. There are Facebook pages. The Facebook pages are really supportive for celiac, for the nervous system, diabetes. There are so many different support groups out there. And sometimes when you feel like you're the only one eating a certain way, these groups are incredibly powerful. And they're just strangers all over the world that can help each other. And they've just made a great difference and a great help for so many people. I think the last theme that I'd like to talk about today is the idea of celebrating success and what I call raising the bar. And this idea I touched on a little bit earlier with you, and this is that idea of trial and error. If you're eating a certain way or you're going to a certain practice, you're doing some wellness practices, or you've taken some foods out, or maybe you're even doing a certain kind of meditation. Whatever you're doing, you really have to take a step back and do two things. The first is say, wow, look how far I've come. I can't believe I used to eat this, and look at where I am just through making these small changes. And way to go, me. Because if we don't stop and be grateful and just recognize the progress that we've made, we just keep pushing. We don't stop and just acknowledge how far we've come. We're going to get burnt out. So really stopping and celebrating how far you've come is so important. And what I tell clients too is maybe after a while, after you look back and you realize you've hit a really big milestone with how you're eating or how you feel, reward yourself. Go get a massage, or maybe try a new light sauna. They have these neat saunas out there at wellness practices, and you can pay for 10 minutes. Sometimes it's $10 for 10 minutes, and to just truly relax. There's lots of little things you can do to reward yourself, or go take time out and have a bath, or take a walk somewhere. Just do something special for yourself, and celebrate your success. And the other part of that is really stopping and being honest and doing this trial and error process where you stop and say, wait a minute, is this really working for me? Again, when I gave up all grains, it was great at first. It was a good kickstart to my system, and my nervous system calmed down. But I found I was really hungry. It just wasn't working for me. So I started to put back some quinoa and some brown rice, or some real wild rice. And then I started to just feel a little better and create that seesaw of benefit versus, that cost benefit balance, right? Of taking it out. And I just found that right minimum, that right perfect spot, right? The sweet spot for having a few grains and feeling really good. So I would say I always tell people, take a step back. Is this working for you? I have clients that say to me, well, I know kombucha is really good for my gut because it's fermented foods are so good. And they start to drink a lot of kombucha. And I've had multiple clients say to me, boy, Marissa, I've been feeling really bloated lately. I don't know what's going on. So we go through a food diary. I say, wait, how much kombucha are you drinking? And they were drinking so much, it was making them bloated. So they said, wait, I thought it was so good for me. And I said, okay, what's good for one person isn't good for someone else. So perhaps, maybe just have a half of a glass or not have it every day, but think about what works and be honest about what's not working. The last thing I think I want to talk about is today is about sort of how to raise the bar. And this goes hand in hand with the process of go slow to go fast and the process of just implementing small changes one bite at a time. So if you started to eat a little bit less sugar, how do you implement that in other things? So maybe you cut out sugar, you cut out soda, and then you start to look at some of the desserts that you were eating and you switched from a really highly processed, a lot of high fructose corn syrup, and then maybe you decided to just have a little piece of dark chocolate, right? How can you just keep setting new goals, implementing trying new foods, trying new vegetables, trying new whole grains if that's a part of your eating style, and slowly starting to make more and more changes slowly. If you've never meditated a day in your life and you just want to slow down, maybe instead of going to a 1 hour, cross your legs and don't say a word meditation, maybe you first start by you get in the car and you don't turn the radio on and you're just quiet, right? Or maybe you get an app called Simple Habit and you do a 5 minute morning meditation that's guided instead of sitting in total silence, right? And then you step it up from there. So how do you raise the bar? And what I find is really interesting, and at the end of the book I talk about, it's not really just about food. I talk about how to use this methodology for way more than food. So you might apply it to your workout, to how you exercise. How do you implement new ways of exercise? Maybe you try yoga. Maybe you try chair yoga, right? Maybe you take a different kind of hike. Maybe you try a Pilates class or you try a spin class. Just try to mix it up. Maybe you want to improve. You like a glass of wine, but you've done all the changes you want. Maybe you try this new wine that has no added sugar and no sulfites. So it's these tiny little changes that over time just add up. I mean, what's really funny is if you told me back in 2012 that I would be, gluten-free, dairy-free, cut way back down on my sugar, my processed foods, wear aluminum-free deodorant, uh, you know, and even have my no wire in my bra, that I'd be wearing organic t-shirts to bed. I mean, all this stuff. I just like the guy in the commercial. I would have told you you're crazy. But, before long, when I look back and I think about how I feel and how I look, I really don't ever want to let go, just like that guy in the commercial. So that would be my message for today is go slow to go fast and make your changes one bite at a time.
Loved listening to you, and all the people who accuse me of filibustering my guests too much won't be complaining about that with this interview. So, very, very enlightening. I learned a few things myself about a diet, although I do have a bad habit of eating like a pig. Luckily, I can't seem to gain a pound no matter how much I eat. A lot of people aren't as fortunate as I am in that regard, but I am, and well, maybe I'll see you at some future conference. It's not going to be in Powered Light Holistic Expo if you were planning on going to the August one. I guess, well, that's another story. Maybe I'll send you the message to explain that. But anyhow, it was a pleasure having you on. I will upload this to YouTube. We've got to convert it to the proper format tonight. I will try to get it on tonight. If not, I will get it to YouTube by midnight tomorrow, and I will send you the link on your email. I do see you have a Facebook page, but there doesn't seem to be any way to friend you or anything on there. So if there was, I posted on your Facebook timeline. But I'll just send you the email, and you can post it on there. And by all means, spread it far and wide to help get the word out about your great advice, your great wisdom, and also the great info that I have to say on my show. And again, people don't have to listen to one ear and the other because I've set this on mono mode. I'm interested to see how that's going to result when I upload this to YouTube. I hope sound quality was pretty well. So take care, Marissa. It was great having you on.
Thank
Uh,
you.
Enjoy the rest of your trek through infinite consciousness. Take care.
Thanks. Bye bye.